Just another deal.
Okay, so thank you all for coming, and it's very exciting to be here. I'm very much looking forward to the next two panels, and trying to give an introduction to the two panels coming up. So the future of decentralized governance. So if we look at the history of governance, there's the old battle between monarchy and democracy, and the new words for that, centralized versus decentralized. And so traditionally, governance, decision and execution of decisions are very top-down. And there was always the struggle of making it less decentral, less top-down, and making it more, or less central and more decentral. And there were many ways to do this and many forms to do this. If we look at society, on a society level, we came from, in the last couple of hundred years, or last few hundred years, from monarchy to then the early stages of modern democracy. And the idea of democracy was to give rights to everyone in society. In theory, in the Bill of Rights, everyone should have the same right to vote for the decisions that were affecting their own lives in this society. And the modern form of democracy was developed as a representative democracy. And the thing with representative democracy is that we delegate our vote every couple of years, every 2 years, to a political party, to a direct representative. And then we lean back and say, hope that these people will make decisions in our interest. Now, whether that's working well or not is up to you to decide. I think the general consensus is that it doesn't work so well. And that's not much of a surprise. If we look back at the history of democracy, the forefathers of modern democracy, Montesquieu himself was saying, as he was writing all these books, he was saying that democracy will not work in big societies because eventually what will happen is that we will have this layer in between, a caste of politicians who will be like a political elite and not be able, even if they want to, they won't be able to act in the interest of other people in big societies. Yet we have those top-down structures. So what came over the years were ideas to try and make this whole process or whole concept a bit more fluid, and liquid democracy is one of many ideas that came up. Who has heard of liquid democracy, just to know? Okay, so obviously not everyone. Liquid democracy, the idea of liquid democracy is to say, okay, I don't want to delegate my vote every 4 years and 5 years. That is not efficient. I cannot trust one political party of only 2 or 3 parties to represent all my interests. I'd rather vote on the issues that are important to me, and where it's not that important to me, or where I think I don't have expert opinion or expertise, I can delegate my vote to someone else and withdraw that vote at any time possible. That's a great idea, but in an analog world, the transaction costs are very high. Now, that was the political spectrum. If we go into the private sector, we don't see that very much. When it comes to corporations, next please, we have a very similar situation, top-down decision and execution trees. And what we've also seen in the recent years, and you probably all have heard of many more decentral management styles, from holacracy, the next one is sociocracy, many other management styles that we've heard of, trying to make processes more lean, faster, more agile, and less top-down. Next one, please. Well, another thing that we've seen in the recent years is with the advent of the internet over the last 20, 30 years, we've had all these amazing technologies allowing us to build great applications. With the Web 2, as Joachim said, we've had this advent of all these platforms. Social platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and co, where we can communicate peer-to-peer with everyone. Airbnb for flat sharing, ride sharing, selling my old stuff, buying new stuff, peer-to-peer, fast, efficient, great, but we have the middleman. And that middleman controls a lot of the action, and we are dependent on that middleman, and we don't get to vote, or we don't get to participate in a lot of these decisions of these platforms that are a great part of our life. And this is why we've seen in the last few years two trends. One is platform corporatism, and we'll have a great panel just coming up. And the idea basically here is to say, let's take the internet, let's take the power of the internet into our own hands, and create these platforms that are so powerful, but make them truly ours. Let's make them, the decision should be with us, and we should be part of it and have shares in it. Another technology that is very exciting, and we will see that in the second panel, blockchain and decentralized web. Blockchain, who here doesn't know what blockchain is? Okay, so most do. So basically, as the economist said, the trust machine. The great thing about blockchain is basically the protocol where you can build smart contracts on top of it. And these smart contracts allow us for the first time to have true peer-to-peer transactions without the middleman. And the great thing here is that we have much lower transaction costs, which means that all the things I said before, liquid democracy, social equity, etc., the things that were great in theory but really expensive to put into action in reality, for the first time we have the opportunity to make that really happen on this technology. And the most complex form of such a smart contract is the decentralized autonomous organization. It's a smart contract, it's a very complex smart contract, and the idea of the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, or DAO, is to have an organization that is fully decentralized, and where the bylaws of the organizations are coded in the smart contract. So the smart contract are the bylaws of the organization, and they are also enforceable when the terms of the contract are met by any action. That is very exciting. It's quite new. It was until recently more or less just theory. And in the last 3 months, something interesting has happened. Like, we'll come to that. Who has heard of the DAO? Okay, most people. So basically, the DAO is the first big experiment concerning decentralized autonomous organizations. And the idea of the DAO was to deploy this contract, the smart contract, and it should be a decentralized investment. It should have been a decentralized investment fund where people could buy shares in that investment fund tokens, and proportional to their amount of tokens, they could start making investment decisions collectively. What happened, and probably most of you know it, that over the creation period of these 28 days, the makers of the DAO had anticipated or hoped that they would maybe make 5-10 million raise in funds and get to experiment with this thing. What happened was that it raised almost 180 million after the 4 weeks of creation at that time in cryptocurrencies. Which was mind-boggling because nobody expected that, and which was basically also meant that the smart contract was holding $180 million, or worth of dollars. And but what also shows that everybody was very surprised that there is this hunger for new organizational forms. Otherwise, people wouldn't have put so much money into it. Yes, there probably also was speculation going on and stuff like that. But I think most people who really invested because they wanted to make new organizational structures happen and experiment with it. And that's quite a lot of money going into that. Now, we all probably also know what happened after that. 2-3 days after the creation ended, the DAO was attacked, and 50 million of funds were temporarily removed by the attacker, so-called attacker. With the hard work that happened a few days ago, a lot of the funds were refunded, and some edge cases still have to be resolved. Without going into the details, we will have the panel later, but next slide, please. What it showed us, and especially the discussion that followed after the attack, and when the community was trying to resolve that issue, there were a lot of questions about whether it was an attack or not an attack, and what should be done, whether the funds should be we should try to retrieve the funds or not. And I think there are like 5 questions that are very, very important that we should ask ourselves in the future when we create future decentralized autonomous organizations. One question was the question of the rule of code versus the spirit of the code. So a lot of people were saying, listen, first of all, the makers of the DAO refer to the code as the only source of truth, and the attacker was not an attacker because basically he just, or whoever the attacker was, made use of the code to found a kind of attack vector and made use of the code. But since the code was locked, it's not theft, it's not an attack, and we shouldn't pay that money back. So there's this big question about the rule of code versus the spirit of the code. And the community was very divided, especially in the first days after that attack. If you look at the social media feeds with the timestamp, there was massive, massive discussion going on. Because for the first time, what happened was that we took this concept out of a white paper into reality. And the theory is that we want to solve everything with code. Reality is much more complex. Because DAOs are very complex smart contracts. And the question is, can we define everything in that smart contract? Next one is, this one. Tied to this is the question of how smart are smart contracts in the end. Because a smart contract can only be as smart as the people who code it and the people who audit it at the time that they code and audit it. Now in time, circumstances change, and the more complex the smart contract becomes, the more potential attack vectors it can have, and we always have bad actors in systems. And the question that became very clear was that we need to find mechanisms how to deal with these edge cases and we need governance mechanisms to deal with these issues that cannot be written hard-coded into the code in the first place. The next question that I think we have to ask ourselves is the promise of the middleman, getting rid of the middleman. I thought that was a very interesting discussion as we were following social media and the blog posts and the discussion that was coming up. There seems to be a notion that the world needs to be 100% decentralized. So we're going from centralized systems, and the hope is that everything can be 100% decentralized. And I think what that showed is that reality is probably somewhere in between. Even though these technologies give us the possibility to decentralize the world more, it will probably never be 100% decentralized. For example, there are questions of, as the community was trying to find a consensus about what to do with this edge case of 50 million gone, there was a lot of discussion going on, but you didn't know who was it. The people who were expressing opinion, were they experts? Was the information true? Was it not true? And the very interesting thing that happened was that a week later Brexit happened. And Brexit was also based on that was like a consensus of a community based on, at least to some extent, misinformation given to the general population. So the question that became very obvious to me was we need to find, whether it's in democracy, whether it's within DAOs, it's not that decentralized systems don't work, but they can only work if we make decision trees visible, if we can have reputation systems for expert opinions, and if we can also have kind of reputation systems of telling the truth and disincentivizing not telling the truth. Because what happened out there in Twitter and Facebook was that everybody was like expressing opinions, and very often the loudest voice in the chat room won the argument and not the right argument. We were very lucky with the DAO that we had this payout period of 28 days. The funds couldn't be paid out to have more time to have more objective discussion about this whole thing. But the first days were just crazy. And they make very clear that we will need to visualize decision trees and many, many other things. Next one. Another discussion was smart contracts. Are they a fixed, ingrained, or can they only be a default state? And is it really, so smart contracts should be seen as a default state from which consensus can happen if it is needed. And yeah, I said that before already, so I think the most important thing for us to build right now, or the biggest gap that we have right now, in my opinion, is that we've built a blockchain, we started building the first smart contracts, we obviously have to do a big job with smart contract security. But what we haven't done is work on governance structures, A, and B, work on how to make information expertise visible and reputation management building and all that. Because decentralized governance without decentralized social responsibility is difficult, I would say. And we need to be accountable for the decisions we make. And we can only be accountable for decisions. We need to have the right expert opinions. So this is a discussion that we need to start. I would very much looking forward to the panel later on. And I think that in the next few years we will see some interesting developments going on in that field. Thank you.